In this video, we'll look at the following problem. So we work at a quality control department of a factory, and our job is to test the widgets the factory is making to make sure they're free of defects. If we have evidence that more than 10% of all the pieces made today are defective, then the factory must shut down for maintenance. So we're going to test 500 widgets, and we find that 60 of them are defective. So we want to know, does this show evidence that the factory must shut down for the maintenance at an alpha value of equal to 0.05? So this is a one proportion test because we just have one proportion that we're testing. So we're going to write our null hypothesis, H sub O, and that's going to be that our proportion equals 10%, or 0.1. And on the other hand, our alternate hypothesis is that our proportion is greater than 10%. Now it's greater than 10% because we wanted, if we have evidence that more than 10% of the pieces are defective, then we have to shut down. So that's what we're trying to see if we have evidence that more than 10% of the pieces we're making here are defective. So we've tested 500 of them, so that's our N. So our N is 500 because that's how many pieces we tested, and we found that 60 of them are defective. Now if we take 60 divided by 500, we find that that number is 0.12, or 12%. Now 12% is more than 10%, but again, we just checked a small sample. We only checked 500 pieces. We could have made more than 500 pieces, and we probably did, but we want to know is if 10% of all the pieces that were made today. So we're going to do this hypothesis test. So now that we have our numbers, we'll go ahead and go to the calculator. So we go ahead and go to Stat. We're going to go over to Test, and we're going to option 5 because we're doing one proportion and we're testing our hypothesis here. So it's the one proportion z-test. That's the one we're doing right now. Let's go ahead and hit enter. And so our P naught, that's the value of our null hypothesis, which is 0.1. Here we had our X value was 60. We found 60 defective pieces of the 500 that we checked. And we want our P value to be greater than 0.1. So we're going to do this one for our test because, again, this is with P greater than 0.1. So go ahead and calculate that out. And this is our P-score here. This number right here, this P equals. So our P-score here, or it's sometimes called a P-value, equals 0.068. Now we compare our P-score to our alpha, which is 0.05. So a 0.068 is actually greater than 0.05. Now because our P-score is greater, this means that we fail to reject the null. So we fail to reject the null, which means we do not have evidence that more than 10% of all the pieces were made today are defective. While there are some defective pieces, doesn't show evidence that more than 10%, so the factory would be able to keep working.